exposing the conspiracy. This is, of course, every man's true duty in life. Any sane, rational human being wants to remove the impediments that are conditioning human behavior and keeping us all in servitude physically. But the mystery school does that and a little bit more. My main work of life, of course, is with the Hermetic arts of divination, tarot, Kabbalah, astrology, numerology. And these are basically great Gnostic traditions that constitute the true, authentic religion of the West. We know that there's an Eastern tradition of mysticism and yoga and self-realization, but a lot of people don't realize that the Western world has its own system of, or its own magical tradition, and that magical tradition originated in Egypt, but it's still pretty much alive and well today. And the West, my particular goal is to use the internet as the new mystery school scenario, because I do not believe that the way that mystery schools were handled in the last 30 years, although they were created by very well-meaning people, was the right way to go with these kind of Uranian, Aquarian mystery school subjects, because by very definition, universities, colleges, bricks and mortar type edifices are Saturnian in nature. So how can a Saturnian, edifice really convey or teach Uranian, Aquarian mystery school subjects? It's a contradiction in terms, which is why none of them have really succeeded. In the ancient books, it is saying that some of the original alien masters, they have very long lives, but they do eventually pass away. But in ancient times, it turns out that some of these beings were actually interred in a sort of what you might want to call suspended animated state. And in fact, they can be revived. And so some of the legends are saying that the dark side might stoop to doing this. They may, in fact, awaken some of these true Antichrist, Nephilim, fallen angel beings that are interred in the earth. And the ancient legends are saying that some of these beings are interred in Iraq, because after all, that's where their empires were first. After Atlantis fell, that's where they set up shop later on. And underneath the soil there, underneath the dirt, hundreds of feet deep in underground caverns that the ordinary Iraqi Muslim people haven't the faintest idea which exists. From satellite, they know where these underground tombs are. So just like vampires that are in a sort of a state of suspended animation, some of these legends are claiming that these old Nephilim are still alive and can in fact be revived. It's a very elaborate story of how they do that, and it involves genetic hybridization and all sorts of necromantic subjects. But if they were ever to awaken these beings, and the Bible says that they will, we could be in very, very serious trouble. So there could be literally another war of Armageddon in the sense that these beings are loose in the world. And then we're going to really find out something very interesting if that should ever happen. And this is one of the reasons why the museums in Iraq were looted during the first moments that the troops went in. We know that these sacred objects, very, very sacred ritualistic objects, were appropriated and stolen from these museums, and nobody has been able to explain why, not even William Henry and others. And I know why, and you will know why, because in any kind of magical ritual, it is extremely important to not only have the sidereal time right, but you must be dressed for the part, so to speak, meaning that you have to have the right ritual objects that are needed for certain kinds of pacts.
Yes, sir. Yes.
For certain kind of rituals. And therefore they have many of these, but they didn't have a few others. And they knew that these were in the museums in Iraq, and they took them because there's going to be occult rituals of a massive magnitude being done, as they already have been throughout the centuries. And this could mean they're arising. Just like in Revelation 22, it says, those who were not, and who will be again, will arise from the bottomless pit. There's reason to believe that some of the original fallen angels will be revived and to preside over a world of total New World Order and chaos.
Oh, wonderful.
These are the reptilian eye that you see at the top of the dollar bill pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, you see a two-dimensional eye. And it's always been put before us that that's the eye of Ra, or the eye of the sun, and it is not. It is the eye of the Nephilim, the fallen ones who rule over all mankind, above the 13th level. So this is another one of these strategies that they're ready to employ, and I go a lot into it in the forthcoming book and in other presentations that I do. The internet is a very different type of scenario, and I find that because of the global reach, and because it's very egalitarian, and because you can present, if you know how, you can present these very spiritualistic mystery school traditions in a way in which is available to all people of all over the world at low cost. So people today don't want to be stuck in traffic. They don't want to be, taking any more classes which are going to be wasteful of time or energy. And also we have to be very cautious about the kind of community that we belong to. So, the mystery school tradition by way of the internet can now be brought to people's homes where they can, in the safety and security of their own home, do what maybe, for hundreds and hundreds of years you've not been able to do.
What do you mean by the term living zodiac?
Living zodiac is nothing more, it's just my term for, I use a couple of terms for this inner intelligence. And scientists like to call it, the intuition, or the psychologists call it your intuition, your higher self. The magicians of the world, the magical fraternities call it the higher guardian self, the higher guardian angel. The scientists are now calling it the ancestral mind, but it was long known as the inner oracle. And it was also, I refer to it as the living zodiac, because in fact the word zodiac comes from the Latin word zaun, which meant living creatures or living beings. The idea being that the zodiac is not an external phenomena at all, and if it gets up into the sky, which we know of course it does exist up there, well, this zodiac is a projection of human consciousness. This is what was taught in the ancient mystery schools of Egypt. It is what has been echoed by all of the different fraternities that are the keepers of the true tradition of astrology. And it makes perfect sense if you look back at even the old diagrams of astrology. Before, the astrology we practice today is a very, very corrupted form of astrology that has come to us after being processed and homogenized by Christian thinkers and by people who work for the secret societies of the world. Ultimately, these secret societies would have preferred to completely banish astrology and all kinds of divination from the face of the earth, and they did try that. But it wasn't successful because, of course, if you suppress something, it just goes underground. So they tried another strategy, which was to keep the semblance of astrology alive, but to change its significance, to affect the calendar, for instance, change it from into the Gregorian system. So they tampered with the agricultural zodiacal calendar, which we all know they did. They also just masculinized a lot of different signs of the zodiac. There's a whole subject of this, of how the corruption took place. Now my work as a purist is to go back to the purest original form of astrology so that we can, again, in the 21st century, visit this powerful archive as it really was meant to be. And that entails some major revision of Western astrology, although we keep a great deal of what we know is in astrology. And the second most important thing is to convey the fact that the zodiac is an internal thing. It is a apparatus of consciousness. This is what we know now after Freud and Jung and the psychoanalysts, and we realize that the human mind can project onto the external world of matter its own psychic content. So the 12 signs of the zodiac, the 12 divisions of the zodiac are basically 12 divisions of consciousness.
Could you explain why the Illuminati are obsessed with certain numbers, such as the number 33, and its astrological significance?
Sure. These numbers, like 666 and 13 and 777 and 21, that they use a lot, the number you just mentioned, which is 33, are not negative. No symbol in itself, no number in itself is negative. But very, very negative anti-human societies do use them, and there's many reasons why they do this. But a few of the basic reasons is because they know that these things are sacred, so if they use them, they get their power. Because these anti-human agencies have no inherent power of their own. They have control, but they don't have any power. They got control because we, the human race, have given up our power. Now, they also get a certain kind of empowerment from using sacred symbols and sacred numbers and sacred ideas. They empower themselves with this in the same way that, a thief can come in and steal something beautiful and then say, it's his. So they have robbed the sacred people. They've murdered all the shamans. They've murdered the oracles. They've murdered the great astrologers of old, a kind of genocide. But they are after that treasure. They want to appropriate it because these are magpies who steal the sacred knowledge so that they can use it for themselves. 33 comes specifically from the movement of the sun in the zodiac. It takes the sun 30 degrees to pass through one sign. But before it's really left that sign, you can add another 3 degrees on because that's the width of the sun itself. So in all, it's like 33 degrees to pass through one sign of the zodiac. And therefore, this number is very important to those who worship the sun. That's why the Illuminati call themselves that name, the ones of the light. The Luciferians worship a god called Lucifer, the son of the morning. Well, the son of the morning is the sun. That's why we have elites. We even call children in school the pupils because it comes from the pupil of the eye of the god of Ra, the god of the sun. We get stars for matriculation when we do good in school. When you graduate, you get a degree, a Masonic degree. All of this stuff comes from astrology, the degrees of the zodiac, you see. So these people are very much appropriated ancient stellar symbolism in order to empower themselves, and because they erroneously think in their mind that they are the descendants of the original Magi who built the pyramid, created culture, and so forth and so on. They literally think of themselves, you see, as the descendants of these ancients. And of course, in many ways, they are the descendants of the Freemasons and the guilds, and they think they have the right to use these symbols. Now, I would say, yeah, they do have the right, but they don't have the right to use those symbols to suppress other human beings. That's my problem. I don't care how many Masonic orders or how many secret societies exist in the world. They perfectly have the right to exist. It's that these secret societies are now very much being used because they've been infiltrated by satanic forces. These fraternities and secret societies and subversive movements are now manipulating human beings to degrade and to enslave, which was not originally what they were meant to do, and which their own grand masters often lament took place. You only have to go to their own works and you'll find this whole infiltration being lamented by the original masters of Freemasonry and by some of these other secret societies. They knew they were being taken over, but they could not do much about it. My work hinges on the philosophical question of how the concept of evil came into the world and into the consciousness of human beings. And mostly, of course, when we have looked to why evil has come into the world, why we are beset with this problem in the world, we generally have turned to religion and to science for the answers. And of course, neither religion nor science has really given us the answer. In fact, some people could argue that the institutions of science and religion are the biggest purveyors of evil we've ever had to endure. So I have learned from studying the ancient mythologies of the world that these ancient folktales and legends and mythologies have a lot to tell us about the coming of evil. And if you read very closely into these ancient mythologies, like the Book of Enoch and the Popol Vuh from Mexico and some of the other ancient chronicles and legends, you'll find that they definitely mention that our planet was visited by alien beings, possibly from the star system Alpha Draconis, about 50,000 years ago, and these individuals came to our planet, founded Atlantis, and on Atlantis began to first try to mate with the Earth women, and then when that proved unsuccessful, they did something very taboo, which was that they involved themselves in transgenic experimentation in which they crossed their own alien DNA with the DNA of our forefathers here. And the consequences of this, one of the consequences of this, was that the human being now became a schizoid creature. He had incredible advancement intellectually, because these alien beings, of course, in order to be able to fly across space and whatever, they were very technologically advanced. So the being that they created had a lot of technological advancement, but that being also had a lot of spiritual qualities.
Sure.
But also what happened was there was great conflict. These two types of DNA were never meant to be crossed. It was an absolute violation of Earth sovereignty, and it was a violation of genetic sovereignty. It's the worst violation of sovereignty anything you could ever even imagine. And the consequences of this hybridization program, I believe, caused what we know to be the injustices and the cruelty and the penchant for sadism and violence that human beings actually have, because it is the only thing that distinguishes a man from the primates and from other creatures. It is sadism, his cruelty, his violence, and the fact that he even gets pleasure from doing those things. In the Book of Enoch, there's even a quote from the leader of these alien beings, and he says in it, "I know you probably will not join with me in doing this sin that we know to be a sin." So they even knew that it was a sin, but they went along with it anyway. And this effect broke cardinal law. It basically was a violation of nature's law. So any of these Christian philosophers and what have you, and the scientists who are telling us that the coming of evil into the world is just purely a natural mistake, it's a flaw in the mechanics of nature, it'll all be resolved as we evolve through time, is one of the biggest lies that anyone can ever want to embody, because nature, as we know, is in perfect harmony, in fact, from the largest neutron star down to the smallest quantum particle. So how on earth could it make a blunder in its highest species, man, a blunder which is so severe that it would undermine her own order, which it is now doing? Nature just doesn't make mistakes like that. And anyone who even thinks that it does, or anybody who falls for this kind of mind control, is is actually complicit in the raping of the earth and in the murder of all the indigenous people who are close to nature, because it is insinuated to us that nature is in fact flawed. Well, then it justifies thinking of nature as a lesser. We don't worship nature or revere it anymore. We think, okay, this is just a dumb thing. Hey, we've got this schism inside ourselves. Nature is responsible. Ergo, we can do to nature and to animals and to indigenous tribes whatever we damn well feel like it. And that's exactly what has been going on here, not just since the Industrial Revolution, but all the way back 11,000 years from the rise of the great empires, what we call the first historical empires of Asia Minor.
And of course, this all ties into the destruction of matriarchal society, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the role of women, which I go into a great deal in the book, this again is central to my work. I do in my book resolve a lot of disinformation and a lot of disconnects that haunt the work of other people in this field. Because one of the things that I did do was I did read pretty much everybody else that is, writes in this area, and I have read most of the comparative mythologies of the world. And therefore I have a full grasp of what makes their work brilliant, and I also have a full grasp of where their big errors are, or the big X factors that they don't explain. And one of the things that has never been wholly truly explained is this whole idea of why it is that women have been marginalized, why they have been denied office politically and certainly religiously down through the years, why the book of Genesis starts with the blaming of the guilt of Eve, and so on and so forth. This also seemed very preposterous to me. But when you read the ancient records, finally the truth comes out, and that is that the Atlanteans, or let's say their descendants now, their bloodline descendants, have never forgiven women for a certain crime that they committed back about 13,000 years ago. Because when the Atlanteans were being overthrown by these creatures that they had created, it was the women who were very much involved with that rebellion. And it's never been forgiven to them that they were involved in this rebellion. And that is why there's been massacres, you see, and all sorts of sequestering and marginalization and punishment that's been meted out to them, especially by Judeo-Christian elites.
So are you basically saying that these entities, let's say, are fully capable of taking over the consciousness of a human being? Is that correct?
Yeah, they do that. They've done it by the fact that they have basically created us. Their descendants, who are behind the thrones of power in the world, absolutely know how to manipulate us. My goodness, that's very easy for them to do. These things are not at all difficult. They've already had control of our biology. So and they keep us under fluorescent lights in their schools for 18 years. We are about as susceptible as you could imagine.
Sure.
We barely resist.
Sure.
Kind of, groupthink, consensus trance that comes over the media every day. Oh, nothing could be simpler. In fact, they're pretty much shocked about how easy it actually has been to control the so-called intelligent people of the world. In the last chapter of my book, I go into a bit of that, about how our own pride, how when we go to school and colleges, we're just dying to, be a slave. It's literally, whose are these trophies and awards that we're coveting? We are just happy, the slave is happy to serve his masters and be involved in this consensus trance, and the elites of the world know that.
How were you able to research this? Were you given access to any interesting archives anywhere, or did you just go on published, public available information?
Oh no, if you went just by what's available to you publicly, you'd never find the answer to this.
Yeah, sure.
I have a huge collection of out-of-print books, which is, I've spent a lot of money on trying to resource. I'm like practically an authority on out-of-print books, especially dealing in these subjects. Also, as I said, from my Eastern side, we were told by our grandmothers, and from the Indian side, a whole other story of the the rise of civilization than what we're taught in the West. So by way of being part of a clairvoyant background, by having Eastern side to my family with very wise people there, we had already grown up hearing a very different story about the coming of the races and the takeover of the world and the history of the First and Second World War and what have you in the British Empire. We had already heard that it was an occult. It was based on occultism. This is information that has been kept from most of the world, even though I say it's mostly hidden in plain view. But of course, the Western person just doesn't see it. But in the Eastern lands, we are much, much more educated in these matters by our forefathers, who are very, very aware, just as the third world people now are very aware, that there is, in fact, a big brother operating in the world. I mean, you still have to beat that into the heads of most middle American Western individuals, but my God,
oh yeah,
you go to the Amazon, you go to South America, you go to India, you know, everybody there has known that for hundreds of years. I mean, you just need to pull aside your curtains down there, and you can see Big Brother happily at work, destroying your forests, polluting your oceans, spreading its designer diseases, and basically annihilating your people. So there's never been any doubt in the third world that there's a thing called a Big Brother operating in the world. It's only here in the apathetic and, you know, what Gore Vidal calls this culture of amnesia, that we can afford that luxury. But even that luxury is soon passing away. The time for these people's exposure is coming.